And for those who are not a member of SEG, we invite you to join us. You can just scan the QR code and join our community. And for the students that are in early careers that are going to join us on the conference this year in Brisbane, we do have a lot of opportunities, a panel of discussions, workshops, speed dating and network. Some students in early career opportunities, for example, the student chapter showcase that you can just scan the QR code here and submit the application for your student chapter to showcase what you're doing in your country. And the submission deadline is on the 17th. And we will also have the CV clinic and the mentor-mentee program there. They're super interesting. You're very welcome to join. So today as your host, you have Ann Thompson, the president of SCG, and myself that will be helping with the questions. And no, it's up to you.
Okay.
And yes, okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, go ahead. No, that's all right. Are you great? So welcome everyone. And I just want to thank everyone for participating with us and joining in this conversation. It's I'm in Cornwall, so you know, in terms of the history of mining, Cornwall in England is a very important part of the world with the Cornish tin mines, and there was also copper here and a bit of gold. So I'm not underground. I know it looks like I am, but it is dark, and I am having to do this panel from my car because that's where I have the best internet reception and cell coverage. So hopefully my lights won't go out, but we'll see how that goes for the rest of the hour. This is to celebrate the International Day of Women in Mining, which is officially June 15th. So you have a couple more days to get prepared for whatever other celebrations you'd like. And it's to bring attention to the important contributions and impact that women have across the mining value chain. And we'd really like to celebrate that. So our focus, of course, being SEG, is on women in economic geology. And that's a world that really was shaped. The history of our science and our profession was shaped by the men who led that work. But now in 2025, more women are entering the industry than ever before. And we have many in leadership and driving innovation. But, you know, globally and looking at our whole world and looking at all the positions there are in the world that women could be fulfilling, we have a lot of progress still to make, and there's definitely barriers and need to continue to have this conversation. So we're going to celebrate our advances today, but we're also going to highlight some practical strategies for all of us to help break down these barriers. And I'd really like to welcome my panelists who are with me today. So I have Sebastian Benavides, who is with Anglo American, and I keep losing track of your title, Sebastian, but you're a jefe. And in Peru and Ecuador, is that right still? Is that, or are you Americas now?
No, I'm looking over the Andes. So the whole
You're in the Andes. Well, that's
everything
the
from
whole, yeah.
Colombia
That's
to
everything.
Chile.
That's everything that's
Argentina.
important. The Andes is pretty big. And we also have Halleluya Ekandjo, who is now based in Saudi Arabia, working with Madden and Ivanhoe as a project or senior project geologist. And we really very grateful that she's even later in the night than I am, even though it looks like it's the middle of the day there. And lastly, but obviously not least, is Irene Del Real, who is a professor at University de la Católica in Santiago. So we welcome Irene to the panel. So I'm just going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves a little bit with just maybe tell us a personal experience or something that you, a positive outcome, maybe a story of and why this topic is important to you. And I'll start with Irene so we can hear from her first.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm also really glad to be sharing this space with everybody. So I'm, as Anne was telling, I'm a professor over here based in Santiago, Chile. I have always loved economic geology since I was an undergrad. And I really love economic geology because it encompasses a lot of different fields of geology. And I really like this idea of having to understand everything to answer the big questions we want to understand in the field. But, just a little bit as an experience and with a positive outcome, since I knew that was the path I wanted to follow, I realized there was going to be this challenge in the sense that it's not a path with that many women, especially here in Chile. So even though I decided to do it, I have to say, it has been a really thrilling career, very fun. And normally when I was studying in Chile when I was younger, there weren't that many female geologists that wanted to, look for a career in economic geology, even less in the world of research. But it was an eye-opener experience when I spent some years out of Chile. I was able to meet other fellow female economic geologists that were passionate about the subject. And one of the things that made me feel very happy about it is that the whole environment and relationship between my colleagues, my female colleagues, is amazing. It's a really tight network, not only here back in my country, but I would say even globally, that we get to know each other, help each other. Everybody's so interested and smart. And I don't know, I think it's just, we're not that many, or, I think now they're quite more, but it has been just a really positive experience to get to know my other fellow colleagues, and just very positive the way we the relationships we build between each other as geologists. So yeah, and I think as a professor, one of my main goals is to get other female students to get interested in the world of economic geology, of mining, of exploration, and don't miss out of a world that is so important for the future and so fun.
Thank you, Irene. Hallelujah. Welcome. Tell us.
Thanks, and thanks everyone for inviting me. A disclaimer, I am functioning on less sleep. It's 1 a.m. in Saudi Arabia. So if I start falling asleep, just know that it's past my bedtime. So yes, I am from Namibia. I've spent some time in Ireland. Now I'm in Saudi. And I think for me, economic geology, I've always wanted to experience different geological settings, okay? Work in different areas, which I have done and I'm continuing to do. And I think the positive thing, a very good story from my end, is being able to move easily and adapt easily in different environments, different cultural backgrounds. For example, being in Saudi, where tradition is not known to have a lot of females in geology. So coming here and being accepted and being celebrated. And for example, I attended the Future Mineral Conference this year in Riyadh, and having a lot of the Saudi younger geo come up to me and chatting to me about them wanting to pursue a career in economic geology gave me hope. It made me realize that, okay, change is coming, and we have a generation that it's traditionally exposed to economic geology. For those that do not know, there's a lot of oil and gas in Saudi, so they are not really used to economic geology or base metal exploration, for example. So having the younger generation approach me and say, would like to be to keep in touch, would like to have you speak to our students, would like to do this. I think it gave me hope that this field is being celebrated and we continue to shape it as the young generation. So yeah, for me, that's the good story, just being able to be accepted in countries where women were not really looked as geologists.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you. And Sebastian, last but not least.
Hi, everybody, and thank you very much for having me here. My name's Sebastian Benavides, Sebastian. So, I mean, look, I'm Peruvian. I'm a geologist, and I lead the team for the Andes for the exploration team in the Andes for Anglo American. Look, to me, first of all, I just want to say that I'm very thankful and honored to be selected to be part of this committee. I think it is very important, and as the only man in this panel, I think it is very important that we join the conversation, and we actually start to drive. You mentioned this industry was shaped by men, right? And it is still a male-dominated industry. So if we don't join the conversations, change is very difficult, right? So you know, I was looking at some stats here, and I was thinking, well, yeah, in Peru, you know, because we always talk about sort of the trend. We're doing a lot. It's going well. And, you know, I was looking, the change between 2018 to 2025 in Peru is that we've gone from 6% in the mining industry, female representation, to 7%, right? And so there's so much to do. And, you know, I can tell you, you know, many stories. So maybe I'll share some during the panel in terms of really good and also really bad situations that I've been through, you know, and I've seen some brilliant women walk out on the industry for cultural reasons or for, you know, not having enough flexibility or anything like that, or whatever, structural reasons, poor leadership. I've also seen brilliant women, you know, have amazing careers when in the right environment and pushing through. So I'm you know, passionate advocate for everybody being comfortable in the environment that they're in and creating the right environment for different people, you know, diversity in all senses, to feel free to be themselves and not have to act like a man, but actually, you know, bring your best from whatever you are, right? And you know what makes you you, and bring, you know, have a space that, you know, you can bring and be yourself. That's when we get diversity of thought. We make better decisions and we push forward. So yeah, it's a very important subject to me. I think we've missed on a big part of the, you know, we're missing on a big part of the talent pool. So we need to bring more women on.
That's a pretty powerful statement. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much for saying all of that. And a little bit of that kind of always hits me, because I, you know, starting my career in the early 1980s, a lot of what I did was just blend in with the men. That was my way of operating and being. Yeah. To the point of when I was working in Indonesia in the field, the children would run down the village streets after me, trying to figure out whether it was a man or a woman. Trying to make that, yeah, that call. So let's talk a bit about, like, kind of give a broad scope of what are the barriers. What are the biggest barriers we think we're facing right now globally? And maybe, and I want to hear from each of you on some sense of those. I mean, Sebastian has already touched on it a little bit, but maybe Halleluya, go back to you first. You know, you're seeing what's happening and what your experience in Saudi Arabia is. There must still be barriers there and in other places you've worked.
Yeah, totally. And I think I'll touch on a few and then sort of opportunities that maybe we can look at just to add to that part. And I think like Sebastian said, there is the underrepresentation, and we know that it's affected everywhere. It's not just in one country, it's all across the world. There is that underrepresentation, especially in management and leadership roles. And the bad thing about having that, or it's lack of champion for change, because you'd want someone to champion change that understands the struggle, and having allies like Sebastian that helps us, right? However, having women champion helps move things faster and at least help with policies that can actually benefit us. And the other issue with that, having less representation, especially in leadership and management, you do lack role models. And I would say that representation matters. Naturally, we tend to look for people that look like us and then try to relate, right? And if you do not find someone that looks like you might not end up doing something. But the other point that I would like to make is, and it's, if you do look for representation, if you do look for someone that looks like you and you do not find that person, do not stop. Look for something that doesn't look like you. Look for someone who does not come from the same background as you. Because you might never know what someone who's different from you, what stories and what positive things they can say in rooms and tables that you don't have access to. So representation is good. However, if that's not available, don't stop. Break barriers. I mean, the title of this chat is Breaking Barriers. So break those barriers. And I think I like breaking barriers a lot because sometimes I actually do not look for what looks like me. I try to go for what looks different from me. And at times, most of my success stories are coming from breaking those barriers. So for everyone, especially the young careers listening, please go out there, break the barriers. The other thing I would like to talk about, and I think it's a common thing, especially both in industry and in academia, is we often talk about we don't have a lot of economic geologists, right? But the question is, what does one need to get to a geology degree? From Namibia, for me to get into a geology degree, I need to have mathematics and physics, and that's from high school, right? And if you don't have those two modules, you cannot enter geology. I'm not sure about in other places, right? So the question is, when we say universities cannot take, or students don't want to take up geology, what is the main reason? And for this, I say, and I'm going to repeat something I said a year ago or 2 years ago when I was representing the natural science at UNESCO, that early choices matter later. And the foundation to instill the desire in girls to appreciate science should start at the very age and at the inception of primary school. Because for us to want to take up science in university, which ultimately means getting in geology, I should appreciate science. But without that love, without that appreciation from a younger age, and from all the stereotypes, ladies are generally a lot, and this is from my experience, especially from where I'm from, they tend to not take up STEM-related courses. So the question of economic geology, I think we should also focus into the foundation, the infrastructure, and the support for girls to start appreciating science. And I'm going to give an example before I give the floor to you, Anne. A boy and a girl, a boy child gets Lego, and they start building, they start constructing, they start building helicopters, they start building everything. And that's engineering already. That's science. A girl child, what do we give them? We give them toys, dolls, we give them toys, so we give them teddy bears. There's already that bias of the boy child can think instantly, the girl child, well, can read a book or can play a doll. So I think we need to start that shift of how can we entice, how can we encourage younger girls to start appreciating science and then support them to actually end up taking it in a university. So I'll leave it there for now, but we can always see me later in.
Okay, that was awesome. It goes back to the core of everything, to be sure. And we can't cover all of those things, but that is a good reminder of that it is through a child and then a young person and into your professional career. It's a whole life thing. It's not just, there's so many moments when we can lose women in particular and other people who may not fit our whatever our bias is of what a geologist looks like. So I'm going to go to Sebastian. I'm going to go back to you first, next, and then let Irene get the last word.
Thanks. So I'll just reinforce my agreement with Halleluya on how I believe we're underrepresented in women are underrepresented in leadership roles. I think it is absolutely needed if we need to drive change. So I made a comment on there's a male-dominated industry. We need to change that and drive down a change. And positions like, for example, and being the president of SEG it's fantastic. It's a fantastic, brilliant person driving change. So I really enjoy it. But I will focus on a couple other things. So one is culture, and the culture. One of the biggest barriers I see is the culture within the industry and the culture that is generated at mine sites, at exploration camps in different places. And culture is there's a definition that I've heard before that I like, that culture is the last 1,000 conversations you had, right? So culture changes, and sort of what we do in terms of creating that right environment or creating the wrong one has an absolute effect, right? So it's those little micro sexist attitudes, that little bit of harassment that people think that but it was a joke or whatever, is important, and it is important to stop, right? And also it's the having coming from the male side of things, is learning that you need to get to, stand on a viewpoint that you have not lived this experience, and you need to listen, sort of what what the experience is like. You know, I've made many mistakes in the past that I recognize, and when I realize, and when somebody calls him out, I'm just like, oh, man, like how did I not see that, right? Like, and I have a very simple story of somebody in a team that I led that sort of, you know, she came to me at a point and said, Sebastian, I don't want to do this because you're asking me to go with a person that I don't know, and we have to go together on a car to, like, we're not going to a camp, we're going to speak to a community, and we have to spend 10 days with a person that I don't know, staying alone in hotels. And I was like, for me, you know, it was just part of the job. And it is like the moment that you, like she told me, I don't feel safe doing it. I don't know this person. Can we change the schedules so that actually I can go with somebody that I know, that I trust on this? And for me, it's one of these moments of like, how did I not think of that, right? But the reality is, if you don't live through that, you're not going to think about it. So, you know, driving change and driving the cultural changes is listening. It is also stopping conversations. It is walking away from conversations that you don't agree with, right? So how we change that culture is important, and sort of driving down the misconceptions as well that are commonly talked about in the field. So I don't know, I wrote 3 down that I always seem to sort of hear, which is sort of, there's a job application, and, you know, we're going through a list, and the people are saying like, oh, well, you know, we hired a man this time because there's no qualified women. There's no qualified women. And you go through like the schedule and the job description, everything, and you see it, and it's like, well, clearly you didn't make much of an effort, right? To, you know, have some flexibility in something. You've made it that it's impossible for anybody that is sort of thinking about maternity, anything like that, to actually be able to apply for this job, right? And we have that. So there's structural things that, you know, adding some flexibility, adding some, you can help attract. There's a big misconception that, you know, fieldwork and family life you know, they're not compatible, so they will eventually drop out. And it's not my experience. I think that more and more, you know, we talk about sort of what's happening outside society as well. And there's more and more successful women in every sort of industry. And we need to adapt our thinking and realize that it's no longer the norm. And the misconception that people say, they're like, oh, well, she got hired for quota, or she got hired because she's a woman. And, you know, people don't do that. Well, maybe there's some people some places where sort of people do that, but most responsible people hire for talent. And they hire because they see a lot of potential in people, and they want these, you know, people to grow. So, you know, these are things that we need to work to break those barriers.
You're muted, Anne.
Irene, you.
Thank you for such wise words from Halleluya and Sebastian, really. That I think it's, you know, and I absolutely agree with Sebastian was mentioning, you know, with a lot of the points, and one that I think is, you mentioned that is not a problem, but I do see it as a big challenge for women. It has to do with life balance and work. And I think not all companies are the same, but I have seen colleagues, you know, leave their career because of that. And I think it is not only, you know, this industry is not only the mining industry, but I think any industry that requires, you know, a lot of field work or leaving your house sometimes is not able to adapt to, you know, a lifestyle that where you want, for example, to have a family. So I think for women is really challenging to be, you know, successful, and at the same time have a family, you know, have kids. And I've seen it with friends, and I see how difficult it is when they have to go to the field. You know, when there's no flexibility also from the companies to be able to balance out how much time they can be in the field and how much time they can be in their house, in the office. And it happens in science also. It's not only, you know, in the industry. I see that also in academia. Basically, you know, the world, the way you are successful has a lot to do with being 100% present and available during exactly this age where most people want to start having a family. And I see that, as a big problem that, of course, it's better than decades ago, way better, but I think it's still a challenge that we need to work on. And if we want to retain female talent, because as Sebastian was saying before, the best teams are diverse. The best solutions come from diversity in gender, in age, geographic location, everything. But if we want to maintain that diversity, that creativity, especially nowadays that we have the big challenges of the 21st century, we need to think about ways where we can retain the talent. And that for women, I think for a lot of women has to do with family, with their life and work balance.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've kind of touched a bit here already on the some practical steps. So I don't know if we have anything we want to add to it, but definitely flexibility around parental leave, I would say, because I do think that subject goes across all genders, and is quite important. And so flexibility in general, maternity, paternity, parental leave, role models, making sure that people are in leadership positions such that we can see ourselves. What else am I missing? Have we got anything else on that of that big list of practical? I have one more, but I'll wait. I'll let one of you, Sebastian or Irene, jump in there.
Oh,
What are we missing? Anything?
talked about something very interesting about, when we're kids, to be able to incentivize, curiosity and, that interest for both female and men the same way. So I think that one was important. It is important also.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just emphasize and I completely agree with the point that Irene made, because I think, and maybe I expressed myself wrong, but the sort of what I mean with this is that it's not a matter of, in my experience at least, looking from the outside, it's not a matter of, the in some cases it might be, but women sort of saying, oh no, I want to do this and not that, and it could be, and that's fair enough, but a lot of the times it is women, like, how do I balance both things, right? And that's sort of how do I do that? So in terms of the practical steps from our side, say I'm as a hiring manager or in the industry or whatever it is, how do we sort of look at the positions that we have, at the sort of the structure that we have in the company, to adjust for this flexibility, right? And adjust to attract and retain and make it possible for so then, the people, and it can be men or women making this sort of decisions, to decide for themselves how they want to live their life, but you make it available, you make it possible, right? So yeah, I think, and you touched on a great point on but I would talk it on, you mentioned parental leave. Here in Peru we talk a lot about the leave for the father. Sorry, I'm losing my English now, but the yeah, so I mean,
paternal.
Yeah, exactly, a paternal leave. So you have places where, like, I've been in companies that are very proud to say that actually, well, the company, the state tells you that maternal leave is 3 months, and we're giving maternal 6 months as maternal leave, and it's just a great benefit for women. And it's like, well, what about paternal leave? No, that remains at 7 days, which is sort of the law, right? So what you're doing is actually you're making the gap longer in terms of whenever hiring managers in that company are thinking, well, it's going to go in for 6 months, right? It should be that it's the same for both, and bring it even, and then so that's a good practical step for trying to take that bias out, right? So
it is. I mean, we're not really talking about bias per se, but I'll tell one short story, which for me, so much of the practical step is learning how to see each other as individuals, learning how to listen, as Halleluya mentioned, breaking barriers, talking to people who don't look like you, and it is learning how not to assume someone can't do a job because perhaps she has a child, learning to accept that everyone has different strengths and learn what those strengths are and put them to work. So I walked into my exploration manager's office when I was 23 or so, and I'd been working for, I guess I was 25 actually. I'd been working with them in the field, 3 weeks on, 1 week off, field, whatever. And he was hiring a new person, and I said, "You don't have any women on that list," because I was forthright. And he said, "Oh, well, they have to change a tire and they have to be able to drive the truck and they have to," and I said, like, "But that's what I'm doing." And he said, "Oh, but you're Anne." And I realized then he just saw me as me, a person he knew I was capable of. He accepted that, he respected me, but me doing that job wasn't enough to make him think that other women could do it. And that was kind of depressing, but it's also really important because it is about seeing each other as individuals across the board and not just making this stereotype that we have of people. So on that note, we are going to move on to talking about mentorship because I think that's such a huge and important topic. And so, Halleluya, can you give us some sense of how you feel about mentorship, either formal, informal, sponsorship? You know, where does it fit in this whole picture?
I think mentorship is very important. It's important to be a mentor. It's important to be a mentee. And I think specific, even my English is now going. Sebastian, I think you've passed on the. I think specifically for the mentoring part, funding, which is a big thing, I think it's limited, especially from where I'm from. We do not have a lot of mentorship funded opportunities. So you mentor someone because you want to, and not necessarily because there's that platform, there's that funding specifically assigned to help with the mentorship. Now, a practical example for me, again, I'm from a rural area in Namibia, up north in Namibia, and I'm one of the lucky ones that had gotten opportunities to experience a lot of different places and so what I try to do is give back to my community, and this ties back to the point I made first, that the early choices matter later, and instilling that foundation. So what I do specifically, and not just sort of generalizing it, is I fund an award at my primary school. And this is an area where science, mathematics, and physics were only looked at as boys' subjects because they were the smarter ones, and the girls were not smart enough to do mathematics and science. So what I do is, through this award, I award the best girl performer in mathematics and physics at the highest grade in the school, which is grade 9. I don't know what that's in other places what grade 9 is referred to, but it's a grade before you go to high school, like you write your matric exam. So the idea with that is to encourage, you give this award as an encouragement for other girls to say, you know what, I would like to be that person, get that award. I would like that person that gets a mentorship, because this award, it's not only about money, it also comes with a mentorship opportunity. So get to talk to the girls that get this award, and then I follow their career, and I've open conversation with them. So if you ever need something, I'm always available. So that's one of the things that I look at, sort of say, how can I support where I'm from when no one else is looking? Because I know how mentorship is important. I know how science is important, especially in this modern world, and making sure that I provide that at my own cost is really something I do. Now, personally, I have a mentor, which is something new. I'm still exploring having a mentor. When I was in university, we had an informal sort of mentorship thing through a group called Yes Network. And I think through that, you realize that sometimes opportunities are there. However, you just need someone to help you or mentor you and guide you in the right direction. Now, in Ireland, for example, I spent the last 4 years. There is what they call, it used to be called Girls in Geoscience, which again mentors girls and make girls appreciate science. It's now changed to Get in Science or Get into Geoscience. It's not girls anymore, so it encompasses everyone. So, and that's a funded one. So there's a difference between that part where it's funded and it's being appreciated versus where I'm from, where funding is not available. So again,
Okay.
I believe in mentorship, and I think it should be done. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Irene, from the academic side,
Yes. So well, I am a mentor for undergraduate students, formally. Funny enough, they're from engineering. I don't have any geos at the moment, but I think it's always good. We sit down once a month, have coffee, talk about their, what they're choosing as a major and things like that. It's a program of the university and it's been incredibly successful and has been very important for the students. And it's not only for women, it's for undergrads in general, but they normally, they pair you with someone, probably, if they're a female student, they will pair you with a female professor, which is really nice. So I think mentorship is really important. It's really important because it gives you, a guide of, and it's important to have someone that you can ask questions. Sometimes your career path or your decisions, what you want to do is not entirely clear. So it's incredibly important to have someone you trust that can mentor you. And it's not always available. So I remember as an undergrad, I didn't have that space. And I think it would have been amazing because I had a lot of questions and there weren't that many people that could help me with answers. And another thing is that, I have had amazing mentors. I would say I have a couple that are incredibly important. But, none of them are women. I actually have had men mentors who are absolutely amazing people, incredibly smart, kind, progressive. I only have good things to say about them. But it hasn't been until, later in my career that I have been able to get to know and talk more with female geoscientists that are my age or maybe higher up in terms of work, or, are older. And it has been incredible to be able to talk to them. So I think it's really important to be there, to have an active role. And I think it makes a huge difference for female, students, people that are already working their career. It doesn't need to be only in the, early stages. Sometimes you need to make a big decision about your career, and it's very important to have that someone that you can ask for advice that can help you out. So I think it's very important. And at least from my part, I think we should all be mentors at some point. It's a way of retribution to our industry, to everything. So I think it's a very essential part of what we do, and it has a very positive impact on those who receive mentorship.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think at this point, like that's a good finishing on talking about mentorship, and we should also mention that there's sponsorship as well, which is actually putting people forward for things. And I think that's another important aspect. It's not just listening to them and understanding what they need. It's actually saying this person should get that job. And that's really hugely important. I think we'd like to hear from some of the participants and people I know have questions. I can see some in the chat. Pollyanna, maybe you're seeing some in the Q&A. And so if you could take over and direct some questions to any of us, but to particularly our panelists, that would be great. Thank you. And as we said before, I think we're at least operating in 3 languages. I don't know if we want to add any to that, but yeah, that would be great. So Pollyanna, and you want to tell us where you are right now?
In my background, I'm in Brazil in an underground mine, but right now I'm in Tasmania. And we do have some interesting questions in the chat. So from Tatiana Alva, she says she works with a lot of empowering women talks. And one of the steps, one of the things she really wants to know is if there is any clear example or a specific policy that has been implemented in industry, something that was really effective in retaining women in the mining industry, and maybe Sebastian can talk about that in the industry, or Irene in the academia. We do have this new policies about the parenting opportunities, but what else can be done? For example, in the academy, we do have some conferences that now have a space to receive kids and to welcome more parents with their families. What else can we do, and what else do you think we can do, Irene or Sebastian?
So I think the most and the most successful, jumps in gender equity I've seen in different companies, different mining companies, have been when it's been very, there's been a structured strategy to confront the problem, and there's a, there's usually like a headline like, oh, we're going to have gender equality by 2050 or something like that, which some people have some sort of bad reaction to it, because then they say, oh, you're just, hiring to reach the quota rather than hiring to, like, for talent and this. But actually that's seldom what happens, right? So you actually, if you go deep and see the actual strategy, it has a lot of the areas that we've discussed during this webinar, right? You talk about structured mentoring programs. It talks about funding scholarships for women in geoscience, for example. It talks about auditing gender pay gaps, right, on an annual basis, and actually seeing what you're doing. It talks about, forming committees so that you can hear the experience of women in the company and understand how you can adapt things, make things more flexible, help with the situation, as Irene was saying, help with the situation that is already difficult as a society. It is already very difficult for women to balance work and life. So how do we help with the structure of the work we're doing? So I think the most successful companies and some of the likes of Anglo American, of the likes of BHP, of Tech, etc., have been very public about sort of where they want to go and have a very structured. It's not an ad hoc thing of, oh, we have one person that's going to drive change or something, but there's actually very detailed plans to how we're going to get there, and it has support. You need to have support from your leadership to do that.
Irene?
No, I think I want to follow up with Sebastian's answer. I absolutely agree. I am a big fan of affirmative action also, and I think it's sometimes, you don't get the best comments about it, but I think it's important to work on having female, geologists or scientists in important leadership roles. And that means, the board directors, maybe a committee that is, choosing somebody's going to get into, a certain position. And I think, as things have been most of the last few decades, we see mostly in these, important power position, still mostly men, which is okay. It has been like that. And I think little by little, as women, we are getting to these spaces, but I would say it's not as fast as it should be. And also, I think it's difficult if you have if the people who are choosing those who are going to, get a better position are only men, or not only men, only of a certain way, they're going to tend naturally to choose someone that is more similar to them, which is why I think it's important to have in these spaces, diversity, and in that sense, I think affirmative action in taking women into specific positions to have, open up a position that is only for women. I think I agree with that, because even though I'm a very positive person, I think we have, done a lot in terms of, moving forward as an industry, also in the academic world. I compare how things are now from when I was an undergrad, and it makes me happy. It makes me smile to see the difference. But there's still more we can do, and I think if we want to do it as fast as it should be, we need to, like, I think it's positive to have, companies, for example, like BHP, that say, okay, we're going to have 50% of our workers are going to be women. And I think that's positive, to have that kind of goals. And sometimes people say, like, no, it should be all merit, but until we do not get to this how this field where everything is leveled, I think it's important to also be able to do that.
Pollyanna, if I can just add, I think Sebastian and Irene hit very important points. I think that the one thing that I would like to add is policy versus the practical gap. The policies might be there, but the question is, are they being actually practically being used? Are they actually being used for us to see results? For example, universities or even organizations like mining companies, they say, oh yeah, we are all about mothers. And you get to universities or you get to companies and there's no room for the breastfeeding mothers. There's nowhere for them to pump milk, for example. And they share offices. Do they go to the bathroom or where do they go? So it's in the policy, they say, we're all about women empowerment. But what happens when I have to come to work and I have to pump my milk to make sure that my baby has milk the next day or the next evening? So it's things like that. And I've been to a lot of universities where these rooms are not available. So the policy says this, practically it's not done. It's more things like PPE. You have worked underground. Now they're developing different PPE that actually fit women for us to use underground. But some PPE, it's really hard for me as a woman to sort of strip my overall off to go pee. And even just bathrooms underground, it's a problem, especially for us women. For men, it's easy to pee, right? Because it's zip and zip pee. For me, I have to strip the whole thing off, which is uncomfortable, right? So it's little things like we are inclusive, we do this, but practically it's not, they're not doing it, right? Everything is really, my opinion and observation, PPE specifically, it's always done defaulting to the standard of male. Like if they can wear it, why can't you wear it? Shoe size is another problem. I'm a size 4 and 5. Sometimes I can't even find proper shoes that can fit my small feet. So it's, people might find it pretty, but it's reality. I need that proper shoe for me to go underground. And they say we're all about women empowerment. Yes, but what happens when you exclude women in the boardrooms where the biggest decisions are made, right? As a female, I'd like to be part of that discussion in the boardroom where the biggest decision about my company is made. But if you're just saying, oh yeah, we have 5 women, but in the meeting, there's never women to make decisions, then where is that empowerment? Yeah. Where is that diversity in thoughts, in ideas? Like everyone said, diversity in ideas is what we have to do. So the point I'm trying to make here is the policies are there on paper, but they're not being practically used. And no one is really monitoring that because what the document says that. The last point I would like to make is intersectionality. We talk about diversity in gender, but I think we also need to look at different things, okay? We need to look at race, we need to look at geographical position and economic geology. It's changing a bit. It's more common in Europe, North America. Where I'm from, it's appreciated, but it's not appreciated in the way that it's appreciated, or people that are economic geologists in North America or Europe are being appreciated. When I publish a paper, no matter how good that paper is, it's not going to be looked at as a paper published by someone from North America or from Europe. And I'm going to bring in something that I talk about a lot, parachute science, okay? Again.
You're covering the whole... It's all right. Quickly, we need some other questions, but go ahead. No, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna end that sort of parachute science. We talk about people from different parts are not good enough. That's where we hire from other parts of the world. But what are we doing to make sure that where we work, people are developed and that knowledge is passed on? So that's all from my side.
I have to say a post, please note in the chat, Marilee Reynolds has posted a link to a really great paper about the bathroom facilities in the field. And we haven't covered that, but it's another huge obstacle. And it's something that in academia, SEG, it's something that I've been thinking about that we want to put a webinar together about. And so, but please look at her paper. So Pollyanna.
Yeah, just one thing to add from all that they said, like besides the policies that we have, all the agenda that we have from ONU that are meant to help us, including people within companies and the academia as well. I think it's really important to speak out, and as Sebastian mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, leave the conversation if that it's not correct. Just speak out, tell them that the uniform doesn't fit, tell them that it's not working. Otherwise, you're still going to be just that one person that they do something, but it's not being brought to everybody. So it's really good to see more examples. I think you can continue and we leave other questions to the end.
So do you have other questions you'd like to have answered, Pollyanna? There was a couple that I noticed.
Yeah, you can go.
Yeah, we've got 3 or 4 more minutes, so I think we should do another. There was one question from Richard Walker who wanted to know about whether we see this kind of 2 ways people deal with each other. One, as a senior person, you kind of say the juniors should have it just as hard as this happens in medicine too. The junior geologists should get out in the field, have everything as hard as they did. That field conditions, I've heard my colleagues talk about this. Field conditions are too soft now. Everybody wants to be connected to the internet, versus others who are more flexible and understanding about the changes in modern life. Do we have any advice how we can encourage senior role models, both men and women, to embrace how the world has changed and culture and maybe what young people are looking for now? Does anybody have any suggestions or any?
So I've seen this, and I absolutely agree that there's two paths basically, and at least from my point of view, I think one of the key things that we need to work on consistently, remind ourselves, and it's going to sound a little bit corny, but I think it's true, is and being able to have empathy for us who surround us, and not only one can think about it from a senior position towards younger generations. Understand that there's change, that there are, different generations with different habits, and be able to have, empathy with the changes in life, and it goes towards the other way also. So I think from every side is important. But at least from my point of view, I think there's something maybe I don't see it that much anymore. That is this idea that if I went through a really bad time, and I have seen that with older female colleagues who actually had a really, really hard time being able to have a successful career, be in the field, as you were saying, and just blend in with the men, and that can be like extremely harsh. So sometimes, there's this feeling that the person that comes behind you should go through this path, like as sort of like as a test, of a life test, and be able to earn that position. And I see it as a way that you actually want to help build the highway for those that are behind you to be able to reach new opportunities everywhere. And I think, yeah, in that sense, but seeing my older colleagues, I also understand why they see it that way. So in that sense, I think trying to understand each side, each position will help us, get to this middle ground where we can see through differences that could be in generation, age, even, as Sebastian was saying at the beginning, which I think is really the story we're telling that was very powerful about your colleague saying that she didn't feel safe, and how that kind of suddenly resonated with you, and you hadn't thought about that. That is something you're going to carry now forever, and kind of. So I think it's, think about the other person, how the other person feels, if they're safe, if they're uncomfortable, if they're happy. I don't know, anyway. And as corny as it is, I think it is, having empathy for the other.
Yeah, and in addition to that, Irene, is feeling is something that it can be irrational, maybe doesn't make any sense, but that's how you feel. So you should respect how the others feel, how you feel. So it's important to talk about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can just make a quick comment on this one. I think, because I've had similar conversations, and I think they're two very different conversations, and they need to be separated, right? In the way of, there is a conversation on sort of, having the right experience, building the right experience, and that changes through time. Technology changes through time. Having the right experience for the future changes through time, right? So I do agree that geoscientists in general need to have more time on the rocks and need to have more experience, etc. It's a very different conversation to the you must tough it out or rough it out because I did, right? And so, you know, I always think I have the same, you know, my father is a geologist, and when he went out of university, he would tell me like his field stints were 6 months long because it wasn't as easy to just jump on a plane and fly. It wasn't like get out in and out of somewhere of you know, in the highlands of Peru or something like that. He would leave for 6 months and then come back, right? And I wonder if the people that's you know, tell young geologists today were actually, you know, when they were young, like doing that, you know, actually you had a better, you had more comfortable situations than the previous generation, and that will continue to be like that, and that's okay. It's not a conversation of sort of rough it out and you need to be as uncomfortable, and we shouldn't be asking women in the case of this conversation to be uncomfortable because we were uncomfortable in other ways and you have to rough it out and live the same experience. It's a completely different conversation to the actually getting the right geoscience experience and exposure at the right time and building that skill base. So I completely agree with what's been said. I think we need to be more empathetic, listen, and be okay with, you know, society advances.
Yeah, true. That's a pretty positive statement. And so it's taking us, we're almost at the end, we're at the end of the hour here. Halleluya needs to go to bed. and many of our participants also who are in Iran and many other places in this part of the world in the dark hours need to go to bed. I'd like to just finish with just one more brief message from each of the panelists, and Pollyanna will include you in this as well, is something that just makes you optimistic. And I think that you know, you've all touched on the things that are positive, but is there something in particular that makes you optimistic for how we can continue to move forward? Because obviously there's a lot to talk about, and obviously we haven't covered everything, and I feel like we need a second hour or another of these webinars to try and really get into it, and we haven't answered all the questions. But let's just do a final round, and I'd like to hear from each of you. And I think I'll start with Halleluya.
Thanks, and what makes it it's that we're having these intentional conversations, tough conversations, but we're having them. It's having allies like Sebastian, which is really important because we need Sebastian to sit in those rooms and advocate for us in our absence. And also is seeing a lot of young economic geologists doing amazing work and us standing on grounds and showing that we are capable and we can deliver. So that makes me optimistic about the future.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to go to Sebastian next, and then Pollyanna, and then Irene.
So what makes me optimistic is that I see a generational change, and I see more young people that, you know, men and women looking to drive change, and I see that the right conversations are being had. Like I was just, you know, I was thinking, looking at the participant list, and I see there's a lot of men in here as well. And in past experiences, I've seen it in congresses. You know, I organized ProExplo in 2023, and we did a chat of this, and you looked around the room, and it was 90% women. So, you know, it's like preaching to the choir. So what makes me optimistic is yeah, the people I work with today. I think they're like, I have some really good examples of my own to continue to lead this, and I hope I can help a little bit driving change wherever I can, at least.
Brilliant.
I think what makes me optimistic, there are many things, from hearing like, wow, I always saw you doing this, that's so exciting, I want to do it too, from seeing colleagues of mine, women that went through so much and they are just publishing that they are achieving really high roles in geology and economic geology nowadays, and just having this space to talk about it, so huge, with people from all over the world. It's amazing. And big thanks to everybody from being here, and also from SCG. I also had a mentor from SCG, and we have the program open for those who want to enroll.
Thank you. Irene?
Well, lots of things make me positive. This space, first of all, that has been organized, I think is wonderful. And I love that there's so many participants. That makes me feel very positive. My students make me feel positive, my female students, the way they look at the future, and the way my students in general treat each other, men and women, you know, it's wonderful. It makes me very positive. And I think there has been a lot of change in a positive way since, you know, 20 years ago until now. But change is not free. It's not spontaneous. So all these positive things require work, require, you know, sometimes social movements, and a lot of things need to, you know, have happened for us to actually get change. So my positive note is to, you know, continue with change and don't give up, because at the moment, sometimes the world looks a little bit scary, especially right now. And sometimes we think we're going backwards when we look at the news, but I don't know, I think seeing the amount of people here, the great questions, and listening to the other panelists, it's a positive time to be here and be a geologist.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. I'm going to turn it over to Pollyanna for just the last bits, but I really appreciate having been part of this, and thank you for including me too. Pollyanna?
Well, thank you everybody for coming here. We're sorry we cannot answer all the questions, but we will have a survey at the end being sent to your email. And well, you're always welcome to send a message to everybody here. And if you need any assistance with this matter or from ICG, you're always welcome. Thank you, everybody.